There are certain evenings that seem ordinary until we look back at them. A quiet street, a house for sale, a young professional arriving for what should have been a routine appointment. The kind of appointment that fills calendars every day in cities and suburbs across Canada. A showing, a client, a key, a front door. The home stood in a peaceful residential area of Saanich, British Columbia. It was vacant, staged only by stillness. Outside, the light was beginning to fade. February on Vancouver Island can feel soft and gray, the kind of winter evening where sound carries differently and neighborhood streets seem to settle early. She had reason to be cautious. The client had come through a phone call that felt unusual. The offer sounded promising. A large budget, urgency, a couple coming from out of town looking for a home quickly. But there were small things that did not sit comfortably. Questions that did not quite have answers. A referral that could not easily be traced. A feeling that something about the arrangement was just slightly off. Still, she was a realtor. Realtors meet strangers. They open empty houses. They balance instinct with professionalism. And she had made a plan so she would not be completely alone. Someone she trusted would be nearby. At about 5:30 in the evening, she met two people outside the home. Witnesses later described a man and a woman. They appeared to arrive on foot. The woman wore a distinctive patterned dress. The meeting looked formal, as though the young realtor did not know them personally. The three went inside. Only a short time later, the house was quiet again. A message would go unanswered. A locked door would become a warning. A pair of shoes would be seen near the entrance. And upstairs, in a room meant to be part of someone's future home, investigators would find the center of a mystery that has lasted for years. Who were the people who arranged that showing? Why did they choose her? And how did they disappear so completely? Welcome back. Tonight, we are looking at the unsolved murder of Lindsay Buziak, a young real estate agent from the Victoria area whose death remains one of British Columbia's most haunting cold cases. This episode is written for quiet listening. The tone will remain calm and respectful. There will be no sensational detail, no dramatic reenactment, and no speculation presented as fact. Where the record is unclear, we will say so. Where investigators have made public statements, we will keep close to those statements. This is a story about a young woman with ambition, a loving family, a growing career, and a future that should have stretched far beyond a winter evening in 2008. It is also a story about planning, about a phone that seems to have existed for one purpose, about an appointment that may never have been about buying a house, about witnesses who saw just enough to leave investigators with a shape, but not a name. And, most of all, it is a story about the people left behind. Lindsay Elizabeth Buziak was 24 years old in early 2008. She worked as a licensed real estate agent in the Victoria, British Columbia area. Saanich police later described her as ambitious, popular, caring, and determined to succeed in her career. Those words matter because this case is often discussed as a mystery, and mysteries can sometimes flatten real lives into clues. But Lindsay was not a clue. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a colleague, and a young woman still becoming who she was going to be. She worked in a profession built on trust and contact. Real estate is public-facing work. Agents answer calls from strangers. They meet prospective buyers. They walk through empty homes. They rely on schedules, referrals, instinct, and sometimes courage. In real estate, a promising client can change a month, even a year. $1 million buyer, especially for a young agent, would have been an opportunity worth taking seriously. But opportunity can be complicated when it arrives in an odd way. In late January 2008, Lindsay received a call from a woman who said she and her husband were looking for a home. The budget was high. The need sounded urgent. The caller said they wanted a property in the $1 million range. According to later reporting based on court documents, Lindsay and her boyfriend, Jason Zalo, both found the call suspicious, partly because it seemed almost too good to be true, and partly because it was unclear why this caller had chosen Lindsay specifically. The caller reportedly said Lindsay had been referred, but that answer did not settle everything. Referrals are important in real estate. A realtor usually wants to know who passed along their name, both as a matter of gratitude and practical business. But when Lindsay checked with people she thought might have referred the client, the explanation did not become clear. The number used to contact her would become one of the central pieces of the investigation. It was a prepaid phone. Later, investigators would determine that it had not been used like an ordinary personal phone. It was used to contact Lindsay. It was registered under a name police believed to be false, and after the crime, it effectively vanished from use. That kind of detail changes the feeling of the case. It suggests that the appointment was not random in the simple sense. The phone was not casually connected to an ordinary buyer. The call was not easily traceable back to a real couple beginning a new life in Victoria. Instead, the call appears to have been part of a deliberate plan. The home eventually selected for the showing was 1702 D'Souza Place in Saanich. Saanich is part of the Greater Victoria region, a quiet municipality known more for residential neighborhoods, parks, and coastline than for violent crime. The house was vacant. That mattered to the caller, according to reporting on the case. Vacant homes are easier to show quickly. They do not require a family to leave for an hour. They can feel convenient. They can also feel isolated. The showing was arranged for Saturday, February 2nd, 2008, at about 5:30 p.m. Lindsay was uneasy enough that she did not simply go without telling anyone. Her boyfriend planned to be nearby. That detail has become important, and it has also been the subject of public discussion and suspicion over the years. But Saanich police have said that Lindsay's boyfriend entered the vacant home shortly after her murder and called police. And public reporting says he and a friend were interviewed and released without charges. In a case like this, it is important to be careful. The absence of an arrest does not give us permission to fill the empty space with certainty. Investigators have pursued many leads. The public has debated theories. Families and friends have lived under the weight of unanswered questions. But a responsible telling has to keep a clear line between documented fact and speculation. So we return to what is known. A young realtor received calls from an unidentified woman. A showing was arranged. A man and woman arrived, and within a short window of time, Lindsay was killed inside the house. Saturday, February 2nd, 2008. The day began like a normal weekend day. Lindsay had plans. Work was part of those plans, but so was ordinary life. She and Jason had lunch before the appointment. Later, they left separately. According to reporting based on unsealed court documents, the timeline of the late afternoon became important to investigators as they tried to understand who was where and when. The showing was set for 5:30 p.m. The house at 1702 D'Souza Place was located on a small cul-de-sac. That detail gave investigators a limited environment to study. A cul-de-sac has fewer routes than a busy grid of streets. Vehicles are more noticeable. Foot traffic can stand out. At around the appointment time, witnesses saw Lindsay meet a man and a woman outside the home. The couple's identities remain unknown. Police have said Lindsay was at the home to show it to potential buyers, who are still unidentified, and that she met them outside at approximately 5:30 p.m. The meeting, from what witnesses later described, did not look like a reunion or a friendly meeting among people who knew each other well. It appeared formal. Lindsay greeted them as clients. Then the three entered the vacant house. A showing usually has a rhythm. A realtor opens the door. There may be brief conversation in the entrance. The clients look through rooms. There may be talk of square footage, light, layout, the kitchen, the bedrooms, the neighborhood, the price. But in this case, whatever conversation happened inside was brief. Saanich police later stated that shortly after entering the home, Lindsay was fatally attacked in an upstairs bedroom. We will not linger on the physical details. It is enough to understand that the attack was sudden, violent, and fatal. Police and reporting have stated that her death involved multiple stab wounds. But the important point for this telling is that Lindsay had been lured into a private setting and did not survive the appointment. The timing was narrow. Capital Daily, citing unsealed documents and the coroner's report, reported the police later placed the attack between about 5:38 and 5:41 p.m., with the coroner's report putting the time of death at approximately 5:40 p.m. That leaves only minutes between the polite meeting at the door and the silence that followed. Jason Zalo and his friend arrived later. The record around the exact timing has been discussed in detail by reporters and investigators. According to Capital Daily's summary of unsealed documents, they arrived, saw Lindsay's vehicle, tried to reach her, and eventually called 911 when things did not seem right. Through the front door, they could see signs that she was inside, but the door was locked and no one answered. The house had another point of access. The back patio door was open. Jason's friend entered through the back area and unlocked the front door. They went inside, upstairs. Lindsay was found in the master bedroom. The emergency response followed, but it was too late. The people posing as buyers were gone. The home that should have been an ordinary listing became a crime scene. Police searched for evidence. They looked for a weapon, hair, fibers, DNA, fingerprints, and any trace that might identify the people who had entered with Lindsay. But the case did not resolve quickly. There was no simple arrest in the first hours. No confession. No obvious stolen property. No known buyer suddenly exposed as fake by a matching address or name. No easy explanation for why Lindsay had been targeted. Instead, investigators were left with fragments: a phone, a caller, a fake name, a couple seen walking, a vacant house, and a young woman who had been careful enough to have someone nearby, but not protected enough to survive what had been arranged. The investigation began immediately, but from the start, it was difficult. Saanich police had a crime scene inside a vacant house. They had witness descriptions of two unidentified people. They had phone records. They had Lindsay's communications. They had a timeline that unfolded over just a few minutes. They also had a public that wanted answers. The prepaid phone became one of the most important early clues. According to Capital Daily's reporting on unsealed documents, the phone used to contact Lindsay was prepaid, had not been used to contact anyone but her, and was registered under the name Paulo Rodriguez, which police determined was fake. That detail suggested planning. Someone did not simply call from a personal number. Someone created distance between themselves and the appointment. Police also looked at how the suspects may have reached Saanich and left the area. Public accounts have long focused on the idea that the phone had connections to Vancouver, and that travel between the mainland and Vancouver Island may have been part of the timeline. The house was selected, the calls were made, and the meeting was set, with enough care that investigators did not view it as a spontaneous encounter. The suspects themselves remained hard to identify. Witnesses saw a man and a woman. The woman's clothing stood out. She was described in public accounts as wearing a distinctive patterned dress. The man was described as tall. But a description is not the same as a name. People can change clothing, hair, posture. They can leave a neighborhood on foot and reach a vehicle parked elsewhere. They can disappear into an ordinary city. Police also had to consider motive. Was Lindsay targeted because of something in her personal life? Was the motive connected to real estate? Was she chosen by someone who knew her schedule, her work patterns, or her vulnerabilities? Was the phone call designed by someone who understood that a young realtor might feel pressure to pursue a valuable client? These questions have followed the case for years. Some theories have received public attention, including theories involving people in Lindsay's social circle, her workplace, and broader criminal activity. But many of those theories have not resulted in charges. In a calm and factual telling, it is important to avoid turning suspicion into accusation. In 2021, Saanich police announced that a task force made up of new investigators was taking a fresh look at the case. They said the task force had obtained assistance from the FBI and continued support from the RCMP. Police also said investigators were reviewing and retesting evidence, including items from the crime scene and digital evidence, and that newer technology had allowed them to develop leads not available at the time of the crime. That announcement gave the public a measure of hope. Cold cases can change when technology changes. DNA testing becomes more sensitive. Digital records can be re-examined. Old interviews can be compared with newer information. People who were once silent may decide to speak years later, after relationships change or fear fades. Saanich police made exactly that kind of appeal in their 2021 update. They said they believed people familiar with the circumstances surrounding the case remained in the community, and they encouraged anyone with information to come forward. The wording is important. It suggests that police did not view the case as an unknowable stranger mystery in the broadest sense. They believed there were people who knew more. But belief is not proof, and proof is what a criminal case needs. By 2025, Lindsay's mother, Evelyn, publicly pleaded again for information. Global News reported that Lindsay would have turned 42 on November 2, 2025, and that her mother released a video asking anyone with knowledge to come forward. The report also said Evelyn had been informed that the active investigation into her daughter's death was ending, and that detectives assigned to the case were being reassigned because of resources. For a family, that kind of news can feel like another loss. The case is not forgotten, but attention is not the same as closure. The murder of Lindsay Buziak remains unsolved because the known facts point toward planning, but not publicly toward a chargeable suspect. The people who arranged the showing appear to have taken steps to hide themselves. The phone used to contact Lindsay was prepaid, used narrowly, and registered under a name police considered false. The meeting happened inside a vacant house, where there were no homeowners present and no casual witnesses inside. The suspects were seen, but only briefly. The attack happened within minutes. The escape route appears to have kept the suspects from being easily connected to a vehicle parked in front of the house. And whatever physical evidence was recovered has not, at least publicly, led to an arrest. There is also the difficulty of motive. In many cases, motive narrows the field. A financial dispute, a domestic conflict, a known threat, a workplace issue, a robbery. But Lindsay's case has never settled publicly into one clear explanation. The appointment itself looked like a setup. That is the part investigators and the public keep returning to. Someone knew how to get Lindsay to that house. Someone knew what kind of offer might hold her attention. Someone knew enough to create a client who sounded plausible. The caller did not simply ask to meet anywhere. She wanted a certain kind of house. Vacant. New. In a higher price range. The arrangement placed Lindsay in a controlled environment at a specific time. That level of planning raises a painful possibility. Lindsay may have been selected deliberately, but selected by whom and why remains unanswered. Another reason the case remains difficult is that it has lived for years in the public imagination. Online discussion can keep a case alive, but it can also create noise. The more a case is discussed, the more rumors appear. People repeat claims that may not be in the evidence. Names circulate, theories harden. Families connected to the victim, witnesses, or people questioned by police can become targets of suspicion without charges ever being filed. That does not solve a case. Sometimes it makes it harder to see clearly. A careful investigation needs more than a compelling theory. It needs evidence strong enough to support charges and survive in court. Saanich police have said the investigation has included renewed review, retesting, and help from outside agencies. But even with new tools, not every old clue becomes usable evidence. A phone record may show a path, but not a face. A witness description may establish that two people existed, but not who they were. A timeline may show opportunity, but not guilt. And so the case remains suspended between two realities. It is not forgotten, but it is not solved. When we think about Lindsay Buziak's case, the image that remains is not only the house, it is the phone call, a voice reaching into an ordinary life and creating a false appointment, a promise of business, a story about relocation, a budget large enough to matter, a referral that could not be confirmed. For a young realtor, it was the kind of opportunity that could have felt both exciting and uneasy. And Lindsay did what many people do when something feels uncertain. She told people. She arranged for someone to be nearby. She tried to manage risk while continuing with her work. That is one of the saddest truths of this case. Lindsay was not reckless. She was doing her job. The people who came to that house used the ordinary expectations of her profession against her. They used politeness. They used scheduling. They used the trust built into a showing. And then they disappeared. Years later, her family is still asking for answers. Her mother's 2025 plea shows that time has not softened the need for truth. Her father has also long kept public attention on the case. The names and faces of the unidentified couple remain unknown to the public. The reason Lindsay was chosen remains unclear, but the case is not only a mystery, it is a reminder that behind every unsolved file is a life interrupted and a family living in the long shadow of uncertainty. Lindsay was 24. She had a career she was building, people who loved her, and ordinary plans that should have continued beyond that February evening. The house on D'Souza Place was supposed to be a place where someone imagined a future. Instead, it became the place where Lindsay's future was taken. And until someone comes forward, or evidence finally points clearly to the people responsible, the question remains open in the quietest and heaviest way. Who made the call? Who walked into that house? And who still knows the answer? Thank you for listening to this calm, true crime story. Tonight's episode was based on public police statements and documented reporting. Because Lindsay Buziak's case remains unsolved, it is important to speak about it carefully. Suspicion is not proof, and speculation should never replace evidence. If you continue with another story, may it be steady, thoughtful, and respectful of the real people at its center. Rest well and take care.